Hello, welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq. This is June 28th, 2012. This program provides network security news and highlights and discussion on cyber threats, as well as countermeasures for those threats. Today we have joining us basically the regular crew, Jim Clausing, John Hogboom, Dave Gross, and I'm Brian Rexroad. And let's go ahead and get into it here. Jim, I think you've been doing some analysis on password guessing attacks. What do you have?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. A few weeks ago, we reported on the breach of the password hashes from LinkedIn, eHarmony, and Last.fm, and that got me thinking about passwords and led to a networking exchange blog post that I wrote last week. But earlier this week, I came across some analysis of the password hashes from the eHarmony breach, and it was the folks at TrustWave that actually did the analysis, and so that got me thinking about, the complexity of passwords and what makes a good password, and I took a look at some of the password guessing attacks that have been taking place against one of our honeypots. But briefly, what happened with the TrustWave folks is they got a hold of the hashes, and they tried to, their goal was to see if they could crack 75% of them in the reasonable amount of time. So they put together some off-the-shelf hardware, about $1,500 worth, and in 72 hours of computing, they managed to crack 80% of the password hashes. Now, in this case, the password hashes were MD5 unsalted, and we talked a little bit about that last time. At least salt them to make it harder for the password. But anyway, once they had these cracked, then they did some analysis on them, and they found some interesting things. And so I wanted to share some of those with you, and then look at the attacks that have been launched against our honeypots and see what we saw there. The first thing that they looked at was the length of the passwords that they cracked. And what they discovered was that the most popular length of a password was 7 characters, but they were able to crack passwords up to 15 characters. But most of the ones that they were able to crack were 7. The most popular lengths were 7, 6, 8, 9, 10. So that's interesting. We always suggest longer passwords. That was one of the big things that came out of our discussion a few weeks ago, was longer passwords are going to make it more difficult for the bad guys. The next thing that they noticed was the composition of the passwords. Now, one of the things to note is that eHarmony apparently automatically converted all of the lowercase characters to uppercase, so they reduced the attack footprint, the target space for the bad guys, which probably wasn't a good thing. But what they discovered is that 57% of the attack, or of the passwords that they were able to crack, consisted simply of letters and digits, and 41% of them letters only. So 98% of them were alphanumeric. Digits only was 1.5%. So that now we're up to 99.5%, roughly, of the passwords were letters, digits, in some combination. Only 629 of the ones that they were able to crack, which was 1.3 million or something like that, contained any special characters at all. And we'll come back to that point in a little bit. Okay. They did a little more analysis, though, and they took some of the lists that they found out there top names for baby boys. 4% of the passwords contained those names, top names for baby boys in 2011. 3.5% contained top names of dogs for 2011. Girls were 2%, years were 1%, curse words were 1%, Major League Baseball teams 1%. So, by seeding their guessing with some of these lists and then tacking things on or whatever, they were able to crack quite a few of the passwords. That got me thinking about the password attacks that we see against that honeypot that we've set up. And now, the attackers that are attacking our honeypot this isn't exactly an apples-to-apples comparison. What we see in these attacks versus the passwords that were actually in use in a site like eHarmony. But there were a lot of things that were interesting and similar. So to refresh your memory, we started seeing the SSH, we saw a lot of the SSH brute force scanning a year ago, so I set up the honeypot using Kippo. No secret there. It's a open source tool out there that set up a fake SSH site and collect passwords and see what they try to do. We've also, on this same honeypot, been capturing POP3 attempts to brute force since about 2009. And so over that time, we've gotten 164,000 total entries in our logs. Of those, 33,878 unique ones. So I decided to do some more in-depth analysis. In the past, we've done a couple of shows where I've looked at some of the top hitters and so forth, but I wanted to do a little more in-depth analysis. And so I decided to use this tool called People, P-I-P-A-L, which is a large fig tree that's native to India. I didn't know that until I was preparing for this show. I believe this is actually the same tool that the folks use to do the analysis of the eHarmony passwords. But so I took a look at the guesses that have been made against our honeypot. And, what I discovered is 6, 7, 8 is the common length of the guesses that are being used against our honeypot, which lines up with the actual length of passwords that were used in eHarmony. But one of the interesting things I wanted to note here is the longest password guesses that we got against our honeypot were 71 characters.
Right.
There were a number in the 50s and 60s, so we actually see guesses of very long passwords. My guess is that they must have found those in use someplace. Otherwise, why would you try guessing something that long? But the majority of them are, the length of most of the passwords that we saw in that other breach. So,
right. I recall looking at this myself some time ago, and we were looking at the passwords that were being guessed, and it's not as if it's a string of ones or something, sequential like that. It's 71 characters that you would never have any idea where it came from. It's like you said, it must have been found in use someplace and got added to the list because of the potential of getting additional hits.
Yeah, it was strange, but the vast majority of them, are the 6, 7, 8. The most popular ones were some of the easiest ones based on the keyboard: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password 1, 2, 3, 4. QWERTY. Now, it should be noted the default password for Kippo is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if they were guessing, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, which we see some of them do, once they got to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they'd probably stop because they got in. So that skews the data a little bit, but probably not enough to make a whole lot of difference here. Some of the other ones, Change Me, actually used to be a default password for an Oracle account, 1111. The base words, basically what this analysis is it takes a word from the dictionary and then adds something on the beginning or end of it. So the top 10 base words were password, test, root, QWERTY. I thought it was interesting, the password with the A changed to an @ sign and the O changed to a 0 also made the list. The analysis also looks for sequences of 4 digits and treats them as a year, and so the top 10 years that showed up there, 2011, 2010, 2009, but then 1989, 1982, 1979, 1984. I don't know if this gives us some idea of the age of the attackers or what exactly that signifies, but it was made for an interesting table. So.
Yeah. Well, it may be going after the age of the person whose account they're trying to guess.
Right. So, yeah, I thought it was interesting. Recent years, made up 5 of the top 6, but then the other ones were clustered, around from 1979 to 1989. So, not sure exactly what conclusion to draw from that, but that also I thought was kind of interesting. Looking at the complexity of the passwords that were being guessed against our honeypot, since we're not doing the uppercasing, we can tell the difference between lowercase characters and uppercase characters. But the vast majority of the guesses strictly stuck to lowercase. And there's probably a reason for that. Users tend to type in lowercase unless they're forced to, because they got to stick the pinky over on the shift key. So the vast majority of them were either strictly lowercase letters or lowercase letters and digits, alphanumeric. Then followed by numeric, then lowercase, alphanumeric, and special. Then you got into the mixed case. The uppercase onlys were dropped off the bottom of this table. But one of the general rules that we give for making a password complex is it needs to be upper and lowercase and a digit or a special character. And so, combining 3 of those 4, only about 10% of the total guesses fell into that category of complex passwords.
They're going after the low-hanging fruit here.
They seem to be going after the lower-hanging fruit. And a couple of the other things that I found interesting, just tacking digits onto the end doesn't really help, doesn't make it a lot harder. Of the passwords that were guessed against us, 5% had a single digit at the end, 2.5% had 2 digits at the end, 9% had 3 digits at the end. And if you are going to tack a digit on there, don't tack 3. That's the most popular one they're guessing. So. But basically, what this analysis made me realize is we really do need to be training our users to use longer, more complex passwords.
Right.
Even just, adding the special characters and making your passwords 10, 12, 15 characters long, is going to increase the difficulty for the bad guys to get in. The guesses that we're seeing against our honeypot, are not that complex.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was very surprised how just adding some capital letters in there that there was a relatively low number of guesses that had capital letters, even without the numbers, only 1.5% here.
Yep. Yeah, just upper and lower case was 1.5%. You're right. And so, anyway, what I wanted folks to take away from this is we're stuck with passwords. Right now we don't have good alternatives for them. We've got to use them everywhere. Mm-hmm. So let's give a little thought to making them a little more complex and making them longer. Those two, even if you're just doing some simple substitutions, those two acts, those two features are going to make it more difficult for the bad guys to guess your hardware, more likely that somebody else will be the one that gets knocked over before you are.
Right. Okay, and Jim, very good. And I guess I'll draw attention again to your blog that 8 thoughts on passwords and password management. And I think that would be actually a fairly good reference for folks to just pull out and share with their teams to help do a better job with passwords.
Yeah, and I may do a follow-up based on this analysis here in the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thanks a lot. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the spam report here. John, any interesting developments this week?
Hey, Brian, no real big changes, so I'm going to try to blitz through this as quickly as possible and just kind of touch on the highlights. The trend is a little bit down. We got 1.6 million. I think the last time we checked it was around 2 million, so we're a little bit lower than we were before. The types of attachments we're seeing are about the same. No real big surprises in here. I don't know if we've seen command ones the previous week, but for the most part, the ones that are mostly spammed out, we see the same type of file formats here. Just stepping back again, I forgot to kind of preface here. This is our spam analysis report. These are accounts that we provision on our email services, not tied to real people. So if they receive emails, we know that they're spam because we did not solicit them. It's not tied to any real person, just so people kind of know where this data is coming from. We take these emails together and we kind of analyze what's happening here. Moving forward, no big changes here in the ones that are just kind of your general spam. I didn't see anything particularly new when I looked through here. It's kind of the same topics that we always see. Again, the trend is a little bit reduced in the volume. This one is the 2-time week winner here, 4 foods that kill fat and 7 food chemicals that cause it. That's been at the #1 rank for the past couple of weeks. The word cloud, no real big changes here either. Obviously free tends to show up a lot. Coupons, because that's kind of what's getting spammed at the most. The larger the word is, the more times that it appeared in the subject line of an email. Save, sale, etc. A lot of these things are the big common ones. Some of the smaller ones are a little bit more interesting, but they get harder to see. We might take a flip on this visualization at some point and kind of reverse our picture at some point, but not this week.
Yep. I noticed coverage on there. I hadn't seen that as prominent in the past.
That's probably, I don't recall. I'd have to go back and look and see. I don't know. Was there coverage listed on any of these top ones here? I don't think so. So it must be somewhere a little bit lower. Yeah, but it could be. It's probably some kind of insurance-based thing, right?
Right.
In any event. But you're right. I'm not sure if I noticed that before either. You just take a look. Okay. Jumping forward, these are the spams we got that had links inside the email that are probably suspicious or malicious. You can't really tell without looking. I can tell you right at the top here, we had one, and we're going to take a look at a few of these, but here's one that was hosted up on Dropbox, the top one here. And the actual name of it is bot space with 2 in parentheses .exe. That's pretty suspicious when you get a file name called, or a link in your email that has bot.exe in it, purporting to be about bin Laden. Another one, Windows Critical Update, pointing to softmanpk.com/update.exe. That's definitely malicious. We'll take a look at that one real quickly, too. Some of these other ones are a little suspicious. I wasn't able to actually fetch them, but this is obviously strange. A attachment that ends in .pdf.exe. That's a very common tactic we see, so that's something that you would be on the lookout for if you're seeing attachments. And again, I advise don't open attachments in your emails from people you don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'll sort of reiterate, if you're running an enterprise and are scanning emails for things, these are things that are pretty obvious that you probably want to block. If you're providing a commercial email service, this is a legitimate file name and not something you can block just based on the fact that the file name looks like it's suspicious. But certainly in enterprise, you have a lot more latitude to do these sorts of things. And I would encourage that, if it even looks like it ends in exe, at least quarantine it and make sure that it doesn't get through.
All right. When we look at the spams that came in that had attachments in them, and they were detected by the antivirus that's, running in the email service. Interesting, this is a new finding that we haven't seen previously, but Crydex took the top spot this week. 31% of the spams that came in and were caught had Crydex attachments in them. Now, Crydex is another password-stealing type of Trojan. Basically sits on your machine, looks at all of the websites you visit, and relays login and password details about those websites you visit up to a command and control server. So very similar in nature to Zeus and some of these other password stealers, but pretty indiscriminate. It seems to kind of just grab everything it sees you browsing to and sending that up to, sending those logins and passwords up.
Yeah, it looks like that Smoller is way down there. Hadn't that been much higher in previous iterations of this?
It has, and good observation. We're going to see why that's so low in a second here. Fake AV lock is actually a new one, too. We're going to take a look at Smoller, as Dave mentioned, and why that's not so high on the charts. And again, these are ones that were detected and blocked. So if you were to leap to a conclusion here, maybe they weren't blocked, and that's why this number is not so high on this pie chart today for Smoller. So when we look at we're going to take, we'll get back to that in a second, Dave, so just hold on. But in terms of the blocked spam email subjects, the kinds of things you should be looking for these ones that we did detect and block, DVRBot has a little campaign going on, and they've kind of been doing this for the past few weeks, I think. The titles, the subject lines are a little bit different here. They're a little bit more verbose, it seems. So they're basically purporting that there's a criminal investigation against you or police investigation about some photos that have been released about you. And we're going to take a look at one of those samples as well. The fake AV stuff, no real big changes here, mostly targeting FedEx, purporting to be a FedEx package that couldn't be delivered. Fake AV lock, same thing, and I'm not quite sure what the difference between these two, the fake AV and fake AV lock are. I didn't take a close look at those. What I can mention is that the Trojan generic one here, now this is a generic detection before they actually get a malware family classified with it. These are probably, any counts that we have for Trojan generic should really probably go into Dromedon, because when you take a look at it, these subject lines are the same thing. So, you'll reap what you sow. I don't know if we saw that one particularly up here, but the criminal investigation we did, this has the potential to completely ruin you. These pictures should be taken down immediately. I think we saw that one up here for Dromedon, yes. So, in any event, probably the same thing, just an early detection as generic prior to them classifying under Dromedon.
Right. At least they're detected.
Yes. Smoller, only one here, as we were talking about. Smoller, not so well detected this past week or so. We'll take a look at why that might be. And W32 Crydex, so this is the one that's probably of interest. We're going to take a look at a sample of that as well. Crydex, interesting subject lines here. Intercompany invoice from various companies that I don't even know who they are, but they're purporting to be from these companies, that they couldn't deliver you a package in some way. They also have been kind of purporting to be FedEx in a lot of these as well. as well as UPS. It looks like they're kind of indiscriminate about what mail service companies they're purporting to be. And my same old story.
Yeah, well, so intercompany invoice type things, that suggests to me that they really are targeting companies as opposed to consumers. Would you agree with that?
I would tend to agree with that.
Okay.
Right, and it's interesting. They, in some of the cases, they're just using acronyms, and so that might be something where you're not familiar with the acronyms, so it may entice you to go in and say, you know, who is this OSN company or something like that? You know, what do they have to do?
Right, or you might think, oh, somebody sent me this email. Looks like, you know, what is this? Is this company? I might be, you know, they accidentally sent it to me. I want to check out just because I'm curious, you know, what this company is up to. So they might be trying to entice you that way.
Can you remind me, do we know how Crydex typically gets used? Is it financial fraud type activities?
I don't really know, to be honest. I don't know if anybody else does. I know it's a password stealer, but I don't know if it's specifically targeting certain sectors. But, you know, as you mentioned here, it does seem to be targeting maybe business users more or people in business industries instead of home users, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a password stealer, and I believe it concentrated on financial type institutions more than, you know, your generic website kind of stuff.
Yeah. Another thing is it looks like they have a bug in their software for sending this, because in the subject line they have the brackets with digits.
No, correction, that's me.
That's you? Okay.
I kind of sanitize the input so that I can kind of collapse a lot of these ones with, whenever I put these digits in here just for other people's viewing note, that means that there's lots of various subject lines, all with random digits in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's actually probably an important point, that some of these things are what can make it, I mean, it requires a little more complex algorithm to be able to find these kinds of things in the, you know, variety of emails that are legitimate and are getting sent. Those types of variations, you can't just do a string match to find these things. You have to have some similarity matching methods.
Yeah, and to Dave's point, though, occasionally we do see malware that has a bug in it that will put something like % curly bracket blah % where they're intending to fill it in from, you know, either some random source or some database that they've got.
Right.
Those are actually pretty easy to recognize, but not these.
Okay, so moving along, unblocked. These are ones that got through the attachment in the email and it managed to sneak through the antivirus detection. You'll notice the top 3 here are pretty high counts, actually, probably about 500 or so of them, all Trojan Smoller, which, if you recall, Smoller was way down on the list. Had they been picked up and detected, it might have actually been closer to number 1 or number 2, but for whatever reason, it took a while for them to get a signature in place. So I would suspect what happened here is they changed their payload, recompiled it in some way that was defeating antivirus detection, and that's why they kind of slipped through the cracks this week.
Yeah, it looks like all the Smollers that you have here are for Delta Airlines tickets.
Yes, a lot of Delta Airlines, right. You can download your ticket number, ticket is ready. I think we've seen Delta as a purported, you know, from person before in other cases. But yes, it does look like that's the case here.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that they're concentrating on one particular airline as opposed to spreading it out across a number of carriers there.
Right. Interesting. This one, I don't think we saw this subject line in some of the other ones, but a FedEx deliver confirmation failed digits is a Crydex one. Actual attachment was important letter and in parentheses doc.exe. Again, maybe trying to fool the user into thinking it's a .doc file, even though they're not even trying that hard here. But in any event, something to notice. So real quick, I'm just going to kind of go through these, just a couple to give you some visual pictures of what some of these top ones that we saw are. Downloader Dromaden spam sample. This is the one that some photo leaked out on you on the internet. Actual attachment is a zip file, photo.zip. Inside is another file called photo.exe, and they're kind of indicating that, hey, some photo of you or your girlfriend got put out on the internet. You might want to track down who it is, etc. The Crydex sample, since Crydex was kind of way up in the forefront here, I wanted to take a look at one of these because we haven't really seen Crydex in quite a while. Intercompany invoice from, such and such a company, basically saying attach the intercompany invoice for the period of July 2011 till August 2011. Kind of interesting that it's entirely complete year old. I don't know why they wouldn't have said 2012 some period, so I'm not quite sure what the problem was there, and I'm trying to put that together if this is an old thing reactivating or what's going on here, but strange. Although I even think Crydex wasn't around in 2011, so that wouldn't even make any sense.
It was in September. It came out in September of 2000.
Oh, okay. And then I wanted to point out some of these, even though this might be a little hard to read. So these were some of the ones that had links inside the email. So the top two ones I just kind of grabbed really quickly. The first one was a news about bin Laden, purporting that there's some information about bin Laden. You can look at some images and whatnot. We've seen this tactic before, especially right after his capture and death, etc. And it's purporting, this link here is purporting to go to a CNN.com website. It's actually not. So this is where they use that kind of trickery we've talked about, where they do an href link to some other site, and the text of the href link is this actual fake link. So if you click on this, you don't go to CNN.com. It actually takes you to another website that actually has that payload in it. And when you run this through, and it's that bot.exe one, we actually run that sample through VirusTotal. Actually, it's pretty well detected. So if you were accidentally to click on this and you had some antivirus running, chances are you might have been detected and blocked it from actually installing. Looks like it's a Trojan, Zeus, ZBot type of payload was in here, and it really lit VirusTotal up pretty well. 40 of 42 antivirus vendors were able to detect it. And lastly, the fake Microsoft patch. Now, Microsoft does not send you emails saying that they have a patch that you should install. This one's saying that's exactly a Windows critical update. Do not fall for these. I'm sure Microsoft would advise you of the same. Do not fall for these. But they're basically kind of riding on the whole Flame malware hype that's been going on. If you're aware of that, there's this advanced persistent threat Trojan. It's kind of a remote backdoor state-sponsored Trojan called Flame, and they're saying that there's a patch that's been released to address this problem. You should install it, and if you click on this link, it takes you to that fake website with update.exe. When you run this through VirusTotal, 19 of 42 pick it up, not as many as the last one. Looks like it's your basic kind of IRC-based botnet-type malware. It's going to connect to an IRC controller. So not sure what they're doing. They're trying to build a botnet of some form using IRC as the back-end command and control, it looks like. So don't fall for these tactics. Obviously, we talk about this all the time. I think most people who watch the program know that. Yep. That's the basic roundup. I don't know if anybody had any other insights or additions they wanted to mention.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of curious that the bin Laden was kind of an old news thing, as well as you were wondering about the date on the prior one.
Right.
Maybe they're not related at all, but like you had suggested, perhaps it was a resurgence of something that had been sort of sitting on the shelf for a while. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know that's the case. Complete speculation on my behalf. I'm just trying to figure out why they would use old dates or old topics.
Yeah, appreciate that. All right, well, thank you very much, John. Let's go ahead and get into the Internet Weather Report. Normally, I start with basically a rundown of the top-level rundown of anomalies here. I'm only really going to cover two of them today, and one of them actually was sort of overwhelming the set of anomalies that we had. The first one here being what I'm calling DVRBot. We've been reporting on this for a while. It's manifested itself first as scanning activity on port 210, and you can see here on the graph that I'm showing here that, sort of the history of port 210 activity. Again, it shows up in our scanning activity. It may not actually be searching for open ports. It may have some other role as a part of this botnet, but ultimately what this comes down to is it's a botnet that's at least predominantly consisting of security surveillance camera DVRs, and we're investigating this further as we go. But over the last week, it's really been pretty aggressive at scanning a number of other ports, and it's probably difficult to read the list here. I'm going to go into some more detail on at least the majority of those ports. We won't cover all of them. But the significance to get from this graph is each of those ports, that is the number of sources that are scanning on those ports, is shown as a separate line on this graph. And so if you sort of start with the 210 activity, we had a point that we reported, I think, 2 weeks ago or so, where it peaked up around about 6,000 sources that were scanning on a port. There was another port, I think, that we had picked up on as well that might not be showing on here. But over the last several days, what we see is sort of an upward trend here, and peaking out up around near just a little short of 12,000 sources that have been scanning on a particular port. And I think this, I'm not exactly sure which port this is that's showing on this graph. But in any case, we'll take a little closer look at the ports. Basically, what that suggests to me is this botnet is growing. It's getting pretty aggressive about looking for opportunities to find other machines or devices that they might be able to exploit. So lots of ports being scanned here. Again, and this is another perspective of the same information, so to speak. Rather than looking at the number of sources that are doing the scanning, this is a cumulative view of the number of probes associated with that scanning activity. And not all of this activity is attributable to this botnet. And in particular, if you see the yellow that's on the background here, that's scanning activity on port 22. You know, we report pretty consistently. There's a lot of scanning activity looking for open port 22. But a lot of this other activity, particularly the anomalies where you have sort of spikes or bumps in activity in scanning, and particularly this sort of busy area over the last week or so, is very much attributable to this one particular botnet. And again, we're going to take a look at, in the next view graph here, some of those ports that are being hit. So we're seeing, I mean, a lot of these are sort of what I would describe as a repertoire of things you would probe for to find Unix platforms, or in this case, probably Linux-based platforms, very similar. First one, port 3 TCP, that's a compression process. It's basically a protocol for controlling compression over a communications link. I'm not sure how often this gets used anymore. I doubt that it gets used very often, but perhaps a system might have a default so that port is open. Next one, similar kind of thing. It's 9 TCP. The service there is discard. Basically, it's for testing connectivity, and basically is equivalent to dev null from a network point of view. And that is also being scanned. Port 19 TCP, character generator, also, again, intended for debugging purposes. Port 21 TCP, FTP, this is probably looking for open FTP ports where they can access the machine perhaps and perform exploits. Port 22 TCP, that's SSH, secure shell. Port 25 TCP, SMTP. So this might be an indicator of the kinds of things that they are looking for to identify perhaps platforms that can be used for mail purposes. So this may give a little insight into how they might be using this botnet. Next one, port 26 TCP is unassigned. I'm not sure why they're scanning that port, but it's one that they are scanning. Port 79 TCP, that's finger. Generally recommended that finger get turned off on machines, but it is something they're probing for. Port 100 TCP, this is new account. It's intended to be able to check the status on a user account. Again, another thing that you don't want to expose to the internet. I don't think it's used very often these days, but it is one service that they're looking for. Another one, port 106 TCP, password server. This is actually, quite frankly, I'm not sure exactly what it's used for, but sounds dangerous. Port 110 TCP. This is POP3, again, suggesting perhaps they are looking for email servers. The next one, I guess, Port 111, we saw an RPC, and then Port 143 TCP here, which is also being probed, which is IMAP. That's Internet Mail Access Protocol. Next one is Port 144. That's UMA. I think it's Universal Media. Actually, I don't recall what that is. In any case, obviously an obscure application. Again, it is a registered port, but one that they are probing as well. And then this port 210 is continuing to be probed. It's not. It is assigned to an application, but the use of it in this case is not the application that it's assigned to. So I just put this sort of as a not applicable in terms of how it's assigned. In any case, clearly looking for Unix systems, possibly looking for mail servers that could be used for spamming operations, and we're not exactly sure what else this is being used for at this time.
And people should keep in mind that just don't think of, when we say Unix system, don't think of, Unix on a regular PC. A lot of embedded appliances out there run some type of embedded Linux, which is basically Unix. Could be exposing any one of these services, which might be why they're looking at, targeting these.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the case. Thank you, John. And in particular, looking for systems that might not be getting patched regularly. A lot of these embedded systems have that sort of characteristics associated with it. And I want to also point out, I did not get a comprehensive list of the ports that this botnet is scanning included here, but these are some of the top hitters that were in our list.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it looks like Telnet is missing from the list. A lot of times they'll scan for Telnet.
Right.
And also, for some embedded devices, they have web-based setups, and so, I don't see them scanning here for, any of the web ports.
That's right. Absolutely. Next item is just another observation, looking at 30 days of activity here, and this is basically scanning activity for port 179 TCP. 179 TCP is assigned to Border Gateway Protocol, and that's basically the interface that's used between Internet service providers or large enterprises for their interface to the Internet to advertise Internet routes. And the concern there would be that is if you can get access to an exposed BGP interface, it may allow someone to introduce new or corrupt routes on the Internet, obviously bad things. So there was a single source from Romania that was doing this probing activity. As you can see, this doesn't happen particularly often here. We don't see too many probes here. And it was, I would say, a fairly aggressive probe, although it does seem to have died off, up around 10 or 11 million probes per hour along those lines. So certainly just a reminder to pay attention to any BGP routing things. It's obviously, if there's anything you want to do in security, you start with the BGP and then work on the servers that sit behind it. Just to take a quick look at the most probed ports here. Most of the routine ones are showing up here, port 445, port 1433, that's MySQL database, 3389, remote desktop protocol, 22 TCP, we already mentioned that, that's secure shell, and port 23 TCP, telnet. And in fact, one of the reasons that it may not have shown up in the anomalies that we were talking about associated with that botnet doing scanning is that there is enough scanning on port 23 and port 22 that it just may not have shown up in the list as notably different than usual. The next one here is very different than usual, and this is actually pretty much dominated by that botnet activity that we were just talking about. So we do have the usual sort of top, in terms of the most sources scanning, port 445 still is on the top, but most of these other ports, port 143, port 144, port 110, port 106, port 111, and even port 255 TCP, all of these are associated with that same botnet. And as David noted, there may in fact be activity from that botnet scanning on port 23, but there are others scanning on that port as well, so it didn't show up as a significant anomaly in the prior portion of the report. So that sums it up for the internet weather this week. There obviously would be other activities. The routine things have not gone away, but in terms of the top 10 actors here, most all of it sort of dominated by that one single botnet that seems to be growing in strength. So with that, I'd like to remind you, we welcome your feedback. If you have suggestions for the program, even corrections of some of the things that we said or opinions that you'd like to share, please contact us at ThreatTraq@list.att.com. You can find this program just by browsing to att.com/ThreatTraq. That's ThreatTraq, one word. And this program is also available on YouTube. There are audio versions on iTunes and FeedBurner as well. And I'd like to thank you. Thanks, John, Jim, and Dave for participating today. Thank you all for joining us and watching or listening, whatever it may be. I'm Brian Rexroad, and until next time, please keep your network safe.